You ever notice how sometimes, when you get into those really deep conversations, the ones about the mysteries of the universe and the mysteries of faith, they can start to sound kind of similar? It's no surprise, really, that so many people are fascinated by the links between quantum physics, the science of all things strange and weird, and Christian theology. But what are those links really? Well, that's what we're going to dig into.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to frame the big question. Then, we need to get the basics down from both sides, physics and theology. From there, we'll jump into the most popular and honestly most controversial link, the whole observer thing. We'll also zoom out and look at the bigger historical picture. And finally, we'll learn how to sort out what's a real argument versus what's just a cool-sounding metaphor so we can all figure out what this stuff actually means.
All right, let's kick things off by getting right to the heart of the matter. This is the big one, right? This is the question that fuels so many books and late-night conversations. Is there a genuine, deep connection between these two massive ways of looking at reality, or is it all just a big misunderstanding? Let's try and find out. Okay, before we can even think about building bridges between these two worlds, we gotta understand the terrain on both sides. Physics and theology, well, they speak completely different languages, so let's start by defining a key term from each. First up, from the wild world of quantum physics, we have this concept called superposition, and it is a mind-bender. It's the idea that a particle, like an electron, doesn't really have a definite state until we look at it. Before we measure it, it exists in this sort of cloud of all possibilities at the same time. It's everything it could be, all at once.
And then, shifting gears completely from Christian theology, we have the incarnation. This is the central belief that the divine, eternal reason of God, the Logos, became fully human in the person of Jesus. So you can see, right away, we're in totally different territory here. One is a mathematical principle about physical potential. The other is a huge, profound claim about history, identity, and the very nature of God.
And you know what? This tension, it's not new, not by a long shot. Centuries ago, Galileo, who was right in the thick of this, made this famous distinction. He basically said, look, the Bible is here to teach you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. And that core idea that maybe science and faith are just asking different kinds of questions is a really crucial starting point for us.
All right, now we're going to get into the juicy part. Let's explore what is probably the most common and definitely the most controversial link people try to make between these two fields, the role of the observer. This brings us to something that is a genuine, bona fide puzzle in physics. It's called the measurement problem. If a particle is in a bunch of states at once, what is it about the act of looking at it that forces it to just pick one? This is the whole famous Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, right? According to the math, the cat is both alive and dead until someone opens the box. It's like our observation forces reality to make up its mind.
And what's really fascinating is that physicists themselves totally disagree on why this happens. You've got the classic Copenhagen interpretation, which kind of just says, well, that's just how it works. Then there's the wild many worlds idea that every possibility actually happens, just in a different parallel universe. But the one that really gets this whole conversation going is the idea that it's consciousness, a mind, that actually forces reality to snap into place.
But, and this is a really crucial point, we need a clarification here. Early on, everyone used the word observer, which makes you think of a person, right? But scientists today are way more careful. They prefer the term measurement. Why? Because it highlights that the collapse is caused by a physical interaction, like a particle bumping into a detector. It doesn't necessarily need a human mind at all.
And the physicist John Bell had this brilliant, kind of witty quote that just nails the problem with the consciousness idea. He asks, if a conscious mind is what it takes, was the whole universe just sitting around in a fuzzy state of maybe for billions of years until the first living thing came along to look at it, or did it have to wait for someone with a PhD? It really points out some of the deep logical hurdles with that theory.
So if that whole observer connection is on kind of shaky ground, what about the bigger picture? Let's zoom out for a second from these specific quantum puzzles and look at the broader history between the Christian worldview and, well, the very existence of science.
You know the story we all hear about science and religion being at war forever? Well, the actual history is a whole lot more interesting. It's packed with groundbreaking scientists who are also deeply faithful Christians. Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics, he was an Augustinian friar. George Lemaitre, the guy who first came up with the Big Bang Theory, a Belgian Catholic priest. Now, that doesn't prove any specific doctrine, but it for sure complicates that simple science versus faith narrative.
So what's the deeper connection people point to? Well, A lot of historians and philosophers argue that the Christian worldview actually created the perfect intellectual soil for science to grow. The idea that a rational, logical God, the Logos, created the world led to a really big assumption, that the universe itself must be rational, orderly, and understandable. And that belief, that the world follows consistent laws that we can actually discover, is a philosophical cornerstone of the entire scientific method.
Okay, this brings us to a really, really critical point. We have to be super careful to tell the difference between different kinds of claims. Is someone making a scientific argument, a philosophical point, or are they just making a poetic comparison? They are not the same thing.
So let's use this chart to sort things out. That claim that God is the cosmic observer, well, that's a theological idea, a piece of speculation. It's not a testable scientific theory, and it's considered pretty fringe in physics. What about the idea that quantum uncertainty leaves room for free will or miracles? That's a philosophical analogy. It's an interesting idea to kick around, but it's not something science can prove or disprove. And comparing the Trinity to wave-particle duality, that's a metaphor. It's using one mystery to help us think about another one, but it doesn't explain either of them.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. What have we actually learned? And what's the most responsible way to think about the relationship between these two powerful ways of seeing the world?
So here it is. Here's the key takeaway from our whole investigation. While the parallels between quantum physics and faith can be fascinating, even inspiring, it's a huge mistake to treat them as scientific proof for theological beliefs. They are almost always analogies or metaphors, not literal evidence-based arguments. And this takes us right back to where we started with Galileo. Science is absolutely brilliant at answering the how questions. How do particles behave? How did the universe evolve? But theology is generally more concerned with the why questions. Why is there a universe in the first place? What's our purpose? These are different jobs, and they aren't necessarily in conflict.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If we recognize that science and faith are asking different kinds of questions, and if we're careful to separate a real argument from a cool-sounding analogy, do they have to be in conflict? Maybe the real connection isn't about finding proofs in the wrong places, but about appreciating the shared human wonder that drives us to ask these enormous questions to begin with.